Should ask, that actually was in the 3rd Armored Division. So if, I never wrote the name of that non-commissioned officer down, but I've told that story 1,000 times because that NCO captured, as NCOs frequently do, the essence of what we're trying to do as leaders. And that's earn and then sustain the trust of those who are entrusted to us. And I tell that to cadets at West Point, so John, thank you for that. Well, somebody you can really trust, we could trust as our 18th chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff is our guest speaker tonight. Our honored speaker is one of us. He's family. He served as the executive officer in the 3rd Brigade, 3rd Armored Division in Desert Storm. And so in that spirit of family, as we're all family here, and of connecting with our Army of today, which is one of our objectives, and those serving and their families, and in commemoration of this, our 25th anniversary of Desert Storm, it's my great honor and privilege to introduce our speaker tonight. You have his bio printed as an insert to your program, so I won't repeat a lot of what's in there. Let me point out a few things and also some family things I got from his brigade commander at the time, Major General retired Rob Goff, his best friend, Lieutenant General retired Mark Hertling, and his division commander, our own General retired Butch Funk, who commanded the 3rd Armored Division in Desert Storm, and through him, Butch's son, General Paul Funk, who just recently gave up command of the Big Red One, who also served with General Dempsey previous to that. Now you'll see he commanded cavalry troop, tank battalion, cavalry regiment and he also commanded Central Command. All in all, 42 months in combat, over 2 generations. He's also been trade-out commander, which he was, the duties he held the last time he was our guest speaker. Been the Army Chief of Staff and most recently retired, as you know, as our 18th chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in what might be judged the most complex and strategically public era of national security in our nation's history. General Dempsey and his wife Deanie have been married for 39 years. They served the military as a team, and Deanie was instrumental in supporting military families and championing many of the family programs that have been critical to our Army's success over the past 14, 15 years of conflict. Marty and Deanie have 3 children, Caitlin, Chris, and Megan, and 9 grandchildren. Each of their 3 children served in the Army, and Chris continues to serve as a major recently assigned to the Pentagon. He knows the Middle East like few others in our nation, spanning the tactical, operational, strategic spectrum, and is comfortable talking with soldiers and presidents alike. I think because he has grown professionally, he has been a fighting combat commander, but he also remains at heart a selfless soldier devoted to his troops and mission, somebody you can trust. General Dempsey is also known to break into song on occasion, and has a special love for Irish culture, and I'm told even traveled to Ireland in his high school years to visit his grandmother to learn the culture. As Brigade Executive Officer in Desert Storm, his attention to detail and ability at an early professional age to solve complex problems already marked him for future large responsibilities. At home, during Desert Storm, his wife Deanie was a great assistance to Suzette Goff in their Friedberg, Germany community, doing all the things together that would lead to the Army's family readiness groups a generation in this war, as she had, as many of you have, had the opportunity to put those into practice again. I had the opportunity 3 years ago to meet with General Dempsey to ask him if he would put his authority as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff behind a study effort to see that future combat wounded amputees would have the same or even enhanced levels of world-class care as this generation has had. Given his heart for soldiers and families, that was easy for him. He answered me even before I finished the request. The study was done and completed thanks to General Dempsey paving the way for that to happen in the future. His post-military career, as you can see, includes a teaching position at Duke University in public policy and leadership, a role as a special advisor to the commissioner of the National Basketball Association for leader development and youth programs, and motivational speaking through the Washington Speakers Bureau. A soldier statesman with a truly unique ability to connect with soldiers and presidents with clarity, with values of selfless service and courage. It is my honor to introduce to you our speaker on our special 25th Desert Storm 7th Corps reunion, one of our own, General Marty Dempsey, United States Army Lieutenant.
General, I told you that we run the great risk of your introduction being longer than my prepared remarks. So we'll see how that goes. By the way, tonight I come to you not as General Marty Dempsey, the 18th Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, but instead as Lieutenant Colonel Marty Dempsey, because in this crowd, I am still the XO of the 3rd Brigade, 3rd Armored Division. And it shouldn't really surprise any of you to know that whatever modest success I had after that is really, very much due to the mentorship and leadership of fellows like Franks and Funk and Goff and Yosak and Griffith. And so I'd like all of us to give them, those that are here with us, a great round of applause for having been great leaders. So the reason my remarks are going to be short tonight is that, first of all, that's how I roll. I mean, I'm never one to get up here and try to lengthen the evening. But also, I actually deeply believe that that the most important part of this reunion has actually already occurred, and that is to say that at each individual table, or at sports bars, or at the, wherever you happen to gather, that you all have come together to remember and to chat with each other and reacquaint ourselves. And that's what you're going to remember. You're not going to remember a thing about well, you might remember what I'm about to say, actually, because it occurred to me while I was sitting right there that that having just come after, finished up 4 years as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, speaking ex cathedra all over the world and in the centers of power, and now I'm coming to you from inside of a to-go coffee cup. I mean, seriously, is it just me, or does this look like it just makes me so thirsty being up here. Now, I really am really pleased, honored to be back with this august group. And when I say august group of leaders, I don't just mean those of you who happen to have the privilege of serving in uniform, but also our ladies who, at a time, it's already been mentioned, were very much groundbreakers, and I'll come back to that in a second. But I also want to tell you, since I spoke here 5 years ago at General Frank's invitation when I was TRADOC commander, I just want to make sure you know what you're getting, because a lot of water has flown under the bridge in those 5 years, and now I'm retired. And I want to point out a couple of things to you. I became a general officer in 2001, so from 2001 to 2015 I was a general, and I was a 4-star from 2008 until 2015. Now why do I mention that? Because I became completely helpless. Now some of you should stop nodding your head with such agreement, especially you, my wife. But I do want to share one story with you. After retirement, we had what I thought was the perfect retirement ceremony. I mean, we obviously had a hand in it, and we were very proud of it, and it was about family, to be honest with you. And I think it all worked out. But anyway, we got some really wonderful gifts as I retired. And once you retire, the lawyers don't have any say in whether you can keep them or not. So I actually was able to keep them, and I decided I should actually write thank you notes to thank people for their kindness and their gifts. And so we were back in our retirement home in North Carolina, and I'm writing out handwritten, of course, handwritten notes, learned, by the way, from some of the folks in this room about, you want to make an impression on somebody, handwrite the notes. So I'm handwriting thank you notes to the people who were so kind to us. And I had a stack of maybe 10 or 15 of them, and I was ready now to mail them, which is the next step, by the way, in writing a thank you note. I've learned that, actually. But anyway, so Deanie was upstairs in our 2-story home. I've never seen the upstairs, actually, because we built a home that I never have to leave the first floor. We have a master bedroom, we have a kitchen, we have a family room, and we have a bar, and it's all on one floor. Apparently we have a second floor, and Deanie was in it. And so I yelled up to her and I said, "Hey, hon, where are the stamps?" And she said, "They're in my purse." Now that immediately, by the way, the most frightening thing I've ever done in my life, and some of the things I've done in my life, is to actually go into my wife's purse. Because one never knows exactly what you're going to find there. And the worst thing is actually that you will never find that which you're looking for, because only she knows where it is in the purse. But I ventured in, I steeled myself for the effort, and I jumped into the purse, and I found the stamps, to my great surprise. And so I went over to the drawer, and I found a pair of scissors, and I very carefully, even though they're serrated, the stamps are serrated, you can actually tear them apart, but I was into this, actually. So I cut them out, I cut out like 15 little stamps. And then I took the first one carefully, laid it right next to the, what are you laughing about? I laid the first stamp next to the first, this is very organized, next to the first thank you note. And then I licked it. Some of you know how this ends. I'm not making this up. I licked it and I stuck it on the envelope, and then I made sure it was affixed. And I tried to move it around, and it moved. And I was traumatized by this. So I moved it around again, and I licked it again, and I stuck it back on. And so she's still upstairs, and I yelled up and I said, "Hun, you got some bad stamps here, baby." Actually, what I said was, the goddamn stamp will not, it won't stick. So she dutifully comes downstairs and she says, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "The stamps they're just bad stamps. Maybe the glue is bad or something. Maybe it didn't activate with my saliva. Maybe I've been drinking too much. I don't know. But the frickin' thing won't stick on the envelope." And she walks over and she says, and I said, What was that?" And she said, "Listen, dumbass. For about the last 8 years, we don't lick stamps. They're self-adhesive." I was stunned. And by the way, I wish I was lying. I wish I was making this up. And so if you want me to continue, General, I will, but if you're thinking maybe now you should reconsider the fact that I'm your guest speaker. All right, so that's all true, and so is what I'm about to say. And by the way, in terms of what's changed between when I realized that stamps had become self-adhesive and now, the answer is a whole bunch of things. But let me remind you why we're here this weekend. We gather this weekend to reminisce. And somebody earlier said exactly the right thing. We're doing this while we can still remember. And, no, I mean, that's sad but true, right? But we're doing this while we still remember, but also while we won't too badly embellish, because from year to year, the stories get better and better and better. We also, in a much more serious note, we do gather to memorialize. You mentioned the 111 souls that we lost in 7th Corps. The number coalition-wide was 148. And we want to make sure that we never forget those who gave their lives for this great cause. We gather this weekend as a family. I'm sure you've noticed that there's not too many veterans of Desert Storm who continue to serve. There's a few, but not too many. And I remember as chairman going up to West Point to speak to the new lieutenants, the young cadets who were about to be commissioned as second lieutenants, and realizing that, me speaking to them about Desert Storm would have been analogous to someone from the Korean War speaking to us. Or to me. And so Desert Storm, while very real to us, has passed into the annals of history. And one of our, it seems to me, one of our imperatives, one of our sacred trusts is to make sure that it will not be forgotten. We also gather at some level as representatives of a past era to try to better understand the challenges facing our successors. We are, after all, soldiers for life, and that's what this pin says on my lapel. And I take that very seriously, as I know you all do. So a couple of thoughts. As I prepared to retire, wondering what exactly among my artifacts and memorabilia would make it into that retirement house that I described to you, I opened some boxes that, frankly, I hadn't opened in a very, very long time. And I found some things that were carefully preserved for a time just like this. A rubber band-bound stack of letters sent home. Some of us who have served in subsequent theaters of operation and conflicts know we really don't write letters anymore. It's mostly about Skype and texts and emails. But there were very carefully preserved letters from both those that I had sent home and those that I had received from our family, probably several weeks to a month or more after we had written them. And one of the things that struck me was I had forgotten at some level about the uncertainty that we were living, in which we were living. When we deployed, we really didn't know how long we'd be deployed. And when we got there, we really didn't know exactly how long it would take. And we also didn't know how violent it would be. And the projections, as you remember, were very dire. And there was always the risk that Saddam Hussein would use chemical weapons or something that would become a mass casualty event. And I'd forgotten about that. I'd forgotten about that abject uncertainty. And we weren't the only ones living with it. Of course, our families were living with it as well. I also found in that box of memorabilia a direct fire plan, very small. It was about 5 by 7, that we had found. It was an Iraqi platoon leader's direct fire plan. And to truth be told, it was pretty well done. I mean, even General Funk would probably have appreciated this particular direct fire plan. And what that caused me to remember was that, although looking back at this, it really does appear to have been a very unfair fight. By the way, the kind of fight we all aspire to fight, right? An unfair fight. But the fact of the matter is, until we demonstrated to the Iraqis, both by the integration of air and ground effects and our ability to maneuver and to bring direct fire to bear, until they realized they were overmatched, they didn't really collapse. It was only when they realized they were overmatched that they collapsed. And there were some there were some junior leaders in particular with some skills in that Army, and that direct fire plan reminded me never to underestimate your enemy, something that I hope we never forget. I also found a crumpled and sun-bleached Iraqi flag. I mean, my guess is that everybody in the room probably by now, has an Iraqi flag of one ilk or another. But that sun-bleached Iraqi flag from 1991 reminded me that, for better or worse, for the last 25 years, the history of Iraq has been, at some level, inextricably interwoven with our own. And the flag of 1991 is a memory, but of course, what we're trying to help Iraq do today is very real and very current, and probably every bit as challenging as we thought it might be. I also found a picture of that was taken of me and, at the time, Colonel Rob Goff and a CGSE classmate. Because when things had settled down a bit, Rob Goff and I took a drive into Kuwait City and found a classmate of mine from the Command and General Staff College who is working in this inner security of the Kuwaiti government. And we had a picture of the three of us taken together. And it reminded me that even then it was about relationships, right? It was about a promise we had made to Kuwait, and it was about a promise we had made to each other, and friendships that have become lifelong friendships. And that picture, of course, is very important to me because it reminds me that it's just not all about us, that is to say, the United States of America. It's about the degree to which we can give our important partners and allies confidence that when they need us, we're going to be there. And we should never allow that incredible system of alliances that we've built at great cost. By the way, we have an alliance of 53 nations all across the globe who really count on us to be the kind of allies and partners that we promise to be. And that picture is a constant reminder. I also found, of course, our chocolate chip desert camouflage uniforms. Now, there was a quality piece of kit. Which, by the way, I mean, I don't know if there's any logisticians or acquisition executives in the room, but these were the camouflage uniforms, of course, that were sort of late to need. I mean, not everybody got them when they really wanted them. And then once we got them, and it was nice to have them in maybe like January, February, March, but then it got a little warm in Kuwait, Ambassador. Where'd you go? Your country that thermostat you've got over there is rather a remarkable thing. And as the temperatures went from 35 degrees Fahrenheit to 105 degrees, that little chocolate chip thing was not as cool as we thought it was when we got it. But I've still got it. And by the way, that was the first of what I would estimate has been about 5 or 6 attempts to figure out just exactly what kind of uniform should we have in that wonderfully mild and moderate climate in that part of the world. And of course, this is one that I'm sure everyone has, and that is the MRE Tabasco bottle full of sand. Does anybody not have a little Tabasco bottle full of sand? Because if you don't, I have extras. And of course, if you're interested, we can negotiate. I'm a civilian now, no lawyers. I can negotiate. But you remember, the MREs at the time were not bad, and in fact, they had made some modifications to the MRE to include the little Tabasco bottle. And so we were enamored of that for about 3 months, and then it got a little old. And so after that, you dumped out the Tabasco, filled it with sand, sent it home to your children from the exotic Middle East. And now looking back at it, any one of us could take our boots and dump it out and pretty much have the same outcome with the sand. But I remember vividly, actually, kind of very carefully and lovingly, actually, filling those little Tabasco bottles full of sand and sending them back to our 3 kids, to try to connect back to them as they tried to live something like a normal life back in Germany. So, those are just some of the memories that I hope you share, and I suspect you do. Here, looking back at it, Desert Storm has been analyzed and overanalyzed. And in fact, it's still the source of quite a bit of conversation. It's been described as the end of an era by some and as the beginning of an era by others. It has been praised and it's been criticized for what it either did or did not accomplish in the grand scheme of history. But you know what? For us, I mean, that's going to go on. But for us, that is to say, for those of us who deployed, who quickly integrated new equipment and new technologies into our formations, and who demonstrated toughness and courage in what I think we would all agree was the harshest possible conditions. And although we were previously untested in this form of warfare, and who applied our doctrine and tactics with precision and discipline, Desert Storm was our canvas. And on that canvas, I think, we created a masterpiece. From somewhere in my past, I remember the story of a class of art students who were listening to an elderly painter explain his creation. And one of the students asked, "How long did it take you to finish that painting?" And the painter replied, 2 hours to apply the paint and 30 years to learn how. And that was Desert Storm. 100 years, 100 hours to finish the fight and 20 years to learn how. So in execution, let me suggest to you that there's 5 lessons that began to emerge and inform our future thinking about our profession from Desert Storm. And the first of those that I will always personally hold most important to me is that it's not practice that makes perfect. It's perfect practice that makes perfect. Or its corollary, out of the mouth of Spearhead 6, talking ain't fighting. I have never before, I never had before, nor have I since, encountered so many leaders at every level, officers and non-commissioned officers, in one place with the tactical expertise and positive leadership attributes of the group of leaders that somehow managed to assemble around this incredible mission. Number 2, the media will affect the course of modern conflict. And here I think Desert Storm was kind of a transitional conflict. You know, the media, as you recall, was pooled and it was embedded and it was ubiquitous in some ways. But even in Desert Storm, the media coverage of that conflict had an effect on the end of the conflict. It informed leaders in Washington about when they should or should not decide to terminate the conflict. You remember the famous highway of death and the kind of emerging thought among some in this country that the conflict had become so one-sided that perhaps it should be terminated. Now look, that was then, but think about now and the effect that the media has on modern conflict. The media's presence, by the way, this isn't pejorative. This is like, you know, saying to yourself, geez, I wish the sun would just not come up one day so it would be shady, you know, for a while. I mean, the media is a part of modern day conflict. And the fact is that their presence on the battlefields guarantee that leaders in conflict today will always be confronted by unexpected challenges, or call them black swans. And also think of it this way. Leadership in modern conflict is leadership under intense scrutiny. And that's just a condition. And our junior leaders, as they've watched how we reacted to that, will always have to confront the reality of leadership under intense scrutiny. Number 3, in the information age, your families go to war with you. With you. Now today it's very clear. You know, young men and women in Iraq and Afghanistan or wherever we deploy them will be Skyping or texting or Snapchatting or Instagramming, and then they'll say, I gotta go now, honey, because I have to go out on patrol. That's just a fact of life. But even back in Desert Storm, we just saw it was nascent in Desert Storm. We saw the beginnings of it. where we had this ability to connect with our families. Now, I said earlier, sometimes the snail mail would take months, but there was just enough coverage that I remember Dee telling me that she would stay up till all hours of the night, sitting there, eager to learn about how the war was going and being fed at some level and at some degree of accuracy and some not degree of accuracy information about the conflict. The fact of the matter is, if you're a leader today, you bring your family to war with you. And, again, that can be empowering, or if you don't acknowledge it and understand that it can be actually quite troubling. Number 4, relationships and trust will always matter most. Always matter most. If you get that right, you get almost everything else right. I was in a position as an XO of a brigade to see the relationships that were built among battalion commanders and brigade commanders and among division commanders. And our senior leaders, as I reflect back on it then, knew how to lead not only down but also laterally and up. And it's worth mentioning here, especially on our 25th anniversary, although he will probably be very cross with me for doing so, that few, and maybe no one, knows how hard General Fred Franks fought to preserve and protect his subordinate commanders and their troops from what it seems to me valid to say was a very intrusive and sometimes abusive chain of command above him. And I will tell you, in him, we were privileged to experience a real lesson in genuine humility and in true moral courage. And I'll also tell you that for me personally, that proved to be an invaluable lesson for jobs that I had later in my career. And finally, number 5, it seems to me that Desert Storm was the validation of the all-volunteer force. Now today, as you know, the all-volunteer force has been stretched, in some cases stretched nearly to the breaking point. But the point is that the kind of conflicts that we fight today are conflicts that require real expertise, preserved over prolonged periods. The kind of real expertise preserved over long periods that can really only come in an all-volunteer force, where you can actually minimize the disruption of transitions. And so as you all, as citizens, start to think as the debates will go on about what kind of force does America need for the future, one of the lessons of Desert Storm for me and beyond is that what this country really needs is an all-volunteer force. Let me conclude. As far as I can tell, none of us has reached the point where we begin to associate the accomplishments of Desert Storm to any one individual or any one unit or any one service's efforts. That would be unfortunate if we came to that conclusion. Rather, Desert Storm was the ultimate team effort, and that is how it should be remembered. We were well trained, we were well equipped, and we were extraordinarily well led. As our nation's leaders confront the reality of simultaneous threats from both nation states and non-states, such as terrorist organizations today, and as they begin to deliberate how much resources and budget to assign to the Department of Defense, they would do well to remember what it took to defeat a middleweight force in the Middle East 25 years ago with very little else going on around the rest of the world. I am proud to be a Jayhawk veteran, a Desert Storm veteran, proud to be a Jayhawk, proud to wear the spearhead patch on my right shoulder, and proud to have been your keynote speaker at this 25th reunion. God bless those who served, who are serving, and their families. Jayhawk.
General Dempsey, on behalf of all of us, all veterans of Desert Storm and families, our enduring thanks and gratitude to you for your service with us as a member of our family, for your extraordinary and selfless and courageous service to our nation. As a very senior member of our military, as chairman or 18th chairman of our Joint Chiefs of Staff, our nation has never been better served by a senior officer which has qualities of moral courage and selflessness. And as a small token of our esteem here, in addition to the standing ovation, I'd like to present you this small memento to keep your stamps in.